Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Those tuning in wherever you are, it's good to have you with us. Please feel free to chat. Let us know if you have any questions. Special thanks to Amnon of Nissan Communications for making this stream possible. We are today April 25th, 2017, and we are now in the part of the year between Passover and Shavuot. And one of my favorite books in Torah is Ethics of Our Fathers. And there is a beautiful Jewish tradition that in the 6 weeks between Passover and Shavuot, we study this. And it's not supposed to be one of those, well, I did this last year, or I've already done this before. No. There's a reason why in Jewish tradition we study these every single year, because we need to study it every single year. And the sages said, before Shavuot, before the giving of the Torah, we got to study this book and relate it to our life every year. Last year I gave a few classes on this, so we'll give a different spin. And if it's similar, guess what? We have to internalize it every single year. Just to give a little background to the book, a short background, and Marty, you've studied it many times before, Pirkei Avot? Mm-hmm. Good. It's called Pirkei Avot. All the English will often say ethics of our fathers. Right. There's no ethics in Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot just means chapters of Avot. Avot means fathers. And what it essentially is one of the books of the Talmud. So there's 5 books in the Torah, right? The 5 books of Moses. Then the Talmud is the oral tradition. The Talmud is divided into 6 sections. For those that made it to the way end of the Passover Seder, there's the Who Knows One. So there's 1 God and 2 tablets and 3 fathers and 4 mothers and 5 books of the Bible and 6 sections of the Talmud. And 7 days of the week and 8 days of the circumcision, 9 months of the pregnancy, 10 commandments, right? There's the 1 through 10. But there are 6 sections of the Talmud. And each section has about a dozen or so different tractates. So the first section, for instance, is the laws of agriculture. Okay. Today that's studied very rarely because we don't live in Israel and we don't deal with all the tithings. But there are a lot of tractates that have to do with farming or, believe it or not, food. So even the laws of blessings finds its way in that first tractate. And maybe you studied brachot before. That is the first of the 63 tractates. Okay. Brachot, blessings. Right. Okay. So the first, we said there's 6 sections in the oral tradition. The first is agriculture. Fine. The second is holidays. Shabbat is in there. There's a tractate Shabbat. There's a tractate Passover. There's a tractate Yom Kippur. It's called Yuma. There's no tractate on the holiday of Shavuot, by the way, because it doesn't have any laws that are unique to it. Just interesting. Rosh Hashanah has a tractate. Okay.
Is that because we just received?
No, Shavuot has very little. I mean, there's nice traditions associated with it, but there's no Passover. There's a lot of laws about eating. Mm-hmm. Even Sukkot, there's laws about how to build a sukkah, and there's laws about the 4 species that we shake. Yeah. The holiday of Shavuot doesn't have any unique laws to it. There's the counting of the Omer, but that's in a separate tractate. Rosh Hashanah has a tractate. By the way, there is a tractate called Shavuot, but it has nothing to do with the holiday of Shavuot. Shavuot means vows in Hebrew. It's the laws of making promises. So if you ever hear someone quote tractate Shavuot, it has nothing to do with vows. You had a question, Brian?
Yeah, so we have the Greeks to blame and the English to blame for a lot of our poor translations, mm-hmm. poor interpretations. But I would think the Pirkei, we can't blame that on them. How
No.
can we get ethics?
Because the book's
Always
about
heard
ethics. So I don't know when this
Okay.
began, but when you go on Amazon, the book is called Ethics because out of the 63 tractates, I said there's 63 in all, in these 6 sections, 62 are legal and 1 is ethical.
Okay.
This is the only one of the 63 that is not halachic. It is not legal. It's suggestions of ethics and, guide to living life, but it's less like thou shalt do this. So that's why it got the name Ethics. But the original is Tractate Avot. And if you look in any Hebrew, it just says Tractate Avot.
How does that compare with the
Shulchan Aruch. Okay. The Code of Jewish Law took all the oral tradition and took the conclusions of the oral tradition and just the laws. Okay? But the Code of Jewish Law is far more recent, the last couple hundred years.
So
when you study the Talmud, the 63 tractates, have a lot of debate and a lot of arguments, and it takes a long time before you actually get to what am I supposed to do in my life. If one wants to know how to observe a Jewish life, Talmud's a horrible place to go because, it takes a long time before you get to the point. So it was only about 1,000 years after the Talmud was written that people started making the practical part of it. Maimonides did it, and the Code of Jewish Law did it. Okay. So there's 63 tractates. One of those 63, 6 sections, remember? So the first one I said was agriculture, the second one is holidays. One of them is the laws of damages and interpersonal relations. So business deals, damages, all sorts of, those are the sections of the Talmud that are studied the most today. They're interesting. Avot is in that one. Avot is in that one. So it's in the section called damages. It's a tractate. What makes it different than all the other tractates is that it's ethical, not legal. And essentially, it takes all the sages of the Talmud, and what was their one-liner? What was the guidance? What did they say how to live life? Yeah.
don't do unto others what you don't.
Well, that's Hillel, right?
That's Hillel.
But it's interesting because in the Torah itself, in the Chumash itself, it tells us a lot of thou shalls and thou shall nots. Its ethics sometimes are a little bit more gray. If I say you should always be judging people favorably. These sorts of things, which we'll have today, judging people favorably, that's more in the realm of ethics. That's different than the thou shalls and the thou shall nots. And that's why it's in a standalone book. Okay. So why do we study it now? Why don't you read, Marty, just from the beginning, Pirkei Avot?
Pirkei Avot contains 6 chapters. You got it right when you said that.
Yes.
And there are 6 Shabbats between Passover and Shavuot. Every Shabbat, customarily after the afternoon mincha prayers, we study 1 chapter. After the Jews left Egypt, they embarked on a period of self-refinement and character improvement. This was critical in order that they be worthy of receiving the Torah on Shavuot. While counting the Omer and the days till Shavuot, we too try to perfect our character. To assist in achieving this goal, we study Avot, the tractate which is devoted to piety, humility, kindness, and ethics.
So on Passover, we always say the Jews left Egypt. I'll word that differently. On Passover, God schlepped us out of Egypt. That's different than we left Egypt. Our character, our behavior was nothing extraordinary, but God schlepped us out. Then we worked on ourselves. So we're supposed to go through that process every single year. Passover, we leave, but then we begin working on ourselves in preparation. Why is it called Avot? Why don't you read the next piece, Janice?
The teachings expressed in this tractate are the father to, i.e., they must precede all other Torah teachings. This idea is succinctly expressed by Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah.
Now, this is a teaching he's going to say later in this book, but what does he say?
If there is no common decency, there is no Torah.
What he means by that is, before you become a Torah scholar, before you can become a righteous tzaddik, guess what you got to be first? A mensch. So is that making, that's, so it's a beautiful Hebrew. Im ein derech eretz. If you're not behaving like a mensch, ein Torah. Don't even start with This level of religiosity, that level of religiosity, you got to be a mensch. You got to be a mensch. Okay? Keep on reading.
This is also the reason why it is customary to study Avot during the 7 weeks of the Omar count. The teachings of this tractate are a necessary prerequisite to receiving the Torah on the holiday of Shavuot.
Okay. I wonder when this tradition began of studying it. I don't know. I don't know. But it's an important tractate. Now,
was it the same time we got our kippahs?
it's a good question. I don't know. Don't know what came first. I should know that when you study Ethics of Our Fathers, you can read it very simply. They learn this in 3rd grade in Jewish schools. They're easy. However, like much of Torah, you can learn it superficially or you can learn it deeper. And when you go through books like this, which are commentary on that, they really dive into every single word. Why did the sage word it this way, not that way? Or often, one sage will give 2 or 3 different teachings in the same sentence. So all the commentators will say there has to be a connection between those ideas. It wasn't just, once we're mentioning Hillel, what were all the things Hillel said? Because they grouped them together, so there is a relationship between the two. The other thing the commentaries will do is make a connection between the sage and the things that he taught. Maybe there was something that happened in that sage's life that prompted that person to teach this idea. So on and so forth. We've done that before. Like the one that says you should always have a cheerful disposition was actually taught by Shammai. And Shammai was known
He was stern.
to be stern. In other words, if Hillel would have taught that, we could say, no, Hillel was always a friendly kind of guy, so of course Hillel said that. But if someone who has a hard time, or someone who's, I don't want to say hard time, someone whose natural disposition was more on the Gevura side of things, and that person says, treat people with a cheerful disposition, that means that you have to overcome your personal disposition and still go out of your way to do it. So there's a lot about who said what that will be important in this. Okay, let us begin. Now, one of the most fascinating things is the first chapter begins with an introduction. And here's the introduction. Why don't you read? Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 1.
Moses received the Torah from Sinai and gave it over to Joshua. Joshua gave it over to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets gave it over to the men of the great assembly. They, the men of the great assembly, would always say these 3 things: be cautious in judgment, establish many pupils, and make a safety fence around the Torah.
All right.
Ooh.
This is different than the rest of the tractate. The rest of the tractate just says the actual ethical teachings. The beginning of chapter 1 gives us a little introduction. By the way, how do we get here? How do we get to the Talmud? So it sums up Jewish Torah tradition in 2 lines. Moses to Joshua, Joshua to an entire generation of 70 elders. We had an age of the prophets. And if you look in Maimonides, he actually discusses the chain of tradition all the way. He divides it into about... Thank you. He divides it into about... Can you pass a napkin if there is one there? Not there's... Oh, there's a tissue there. He divides it into actually about 50. But you want to know how we got to today? And he passes through every single one of those teachers. But these are the stages in the transmission. Now here's the question. Why would this be in Pirkei Avot? If there was ever a place to have this, where does it belong? At the beginning of the first tractate of the Talmud, which happens to be Brachot. It's odd that this comes in Pirkei Avot. You would think this should be an introduction to the entire oral tradition, the entire Talmud.
So Pirkei Avot is not the first tractate?
No, it's not. It is within the 3rd section, and it's towards the end of the 3rd section. So that is something many people struggle with? And the answer they gave is important. You might look at Pirkei Avot as nothing different than another book at Barnes and Nobles on the self-help section.
Oh,
No. This is what the best they came up with, right? I mean, this is different than the Chumash. This is different than the rest of Torah, where these are just ideas that people at a particular time thought of, but we don't see anything about this that seems godly or novel. This was just their suggestions. Today we have, so no one's going to think in Tractate Passover that they made this up. No, that Tractate Passover, they got these traditions from all the way back to Sinai. No one's going to think when they're discussing how to keep Shabbat or how, but when it comes to this book, there's more room to think this is no more than human ethics. So therefore it says at the beginning, it is true that these are the one-liners of sages. And it is true that the wording and the way it's pronounced is human, right? But these ideas were ones that were passed down all the way since Sinai. It was the way Jews lived. It may not have been emphasized in this way, it may not have been taught in this way, but the values were Jewish values going all the way back. So that is one of the answers why this belongs here. Any thoughts on that? So it's important to say that, because we made the blessing al divrei Torah before we started today, because what we're learning is still Torah. It's not just any other self-help. Okay.
Okay, so what do you think is men of the Great Assembly?
So that was an era, a very important era, when the rabbinic Judaism just began. That was when the Jews came back to Israel after the story of Purim. They were led by someone named Ezra. And that's when so much of Judaism as we know it today was formulated. The prayers began then. Amidah began then. Synagogues began then. Many of the things that didn't take place in the first couple thousand years of Judaism began at. So they were called the men of the Great Assembly. And so it begins here. Before we get into the sages of the Talmud were preceded by whom? The men of the Great Assembly. And it says the men of the Great Assembly, they said thousands of things. But these were the three things that are recorded in Ethics of Our Fathers. Why these three? What's unique about these three things? And maybe the idea is something big was happening at this point. The age of prophecy was over. How was Torah to be understood? Intellectually, through a lot of rigorous Talmud, through debate, through using our own human minds. So
Through action.
through action, exactly. So it was the way of life. So they're saying before we proceed along this route, a few things. We have to be very careful at this point. We're about to enter a new era. We're going to be making all sorts of new laws in Judaism. So three things. Be cautious. Don't jump to new decrees or new institutions before we really, really think this through. B is make sure that when we make these new laws, we have many, many pupils. In other words, there should be all sorts of opinions there on the table. To be able to come up with the halacha with huge amounts of people that are all trained in this way. And the third thing is we have to make sure when we go along this route to always make a safety fence around the Torah, which is up until today, one of the things people have the biggest problem with rabbinic Judaism is the safety fences.
Is that literal?
Safety fences means that what the rabbis did is, in order to make sure that people don't violate biblical law, they created a fence around biblical law. The same way we don't want, God forbid, children to fall into a swimming pool, so we put a fence around the swimming pool. So they didn't want, for instance, people to eat meat and milk together. So what do they say? You can't eat. Time limits. They said no chicken and milk either. This is an example. Chicken and milk is a rabbinic creation. Yeah. The Torah talks about animals that have young, nothing to do with eggs.
And milk.
Milk. So that is clear. So This is when there are many on Shabbat. There's those things that are biblically not allowed, and there's many things on Shabbat that are not rabbinically allowed. All of these was to maintain the sanctity of Shabbat. And they said already 2,000 years ago, there's a need for this. This will be something that years later people question, people will have a hard time with. And we don't necessarily always know the reasons for why they came up with the fences that they did. Often when we read the reasons, we'll say, well, that doesn't apply today. Right? That is something people will always say. I understood why back then that was necessary, but today that's no longer necessary. Thank God we have an FDA or whatever the case is that clearly labels food. And that's why this is at the beginning of Pirkei Avot, that it is important up until today to have this safety fence. By the way, the same thing is true in our lives. If there are issues that we struggle with, not only do we not want to do them, we want to make sure that we don't allow for situations to arise that do lead us to do them. We spoke on Shabbos. If someone, God forbid, has a problem with alcohol, at the Seder, they should be drinking grape juice. They don't test yourself, you know. If there's an issue that you struggle in, create a safety fence. It takes humility to do that. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to do that.
So the Sephardic do chicken also is also considered meat for the Sephardic.
Correct.
But when the Pesach comes, they don't bother with the.
But the
That's
conservatives,
much later in history.
and the conservatives now don't have a response that says that kitchen nut is okay.
Conservative.
So the conservative just changed that last year.
Say that again. I didn't
The
get that.
Conservative Jews,
conservatives
they
the same
started
thing as the Sephardic, that you can eat rice and beans and
Right.
Passover. So the conservative just did that last year or the year
Change
before.
that to
Change
be.
it.
But
But
this
after
is
all,
referring to something much more
Right.
old.
But after a lot of debating,
Correct.
not.
Oh, yeah, it was a lot of debate. sure.
Kitniyot, though, this discussion is 2,000 years ago. When it comes to the code of Jewish law, Ashkenazi and Sephardim are pretty much the same. It's more and more recent times where those differences happened. At this
How
point,
recent is that? You're talking about 1,000 years ago?
Kitniyot
Yeah.
is
700 years, I think. About
600-700 years ago.
1300s.
Really?
Rice on Pesach. Rice is the
Rice
Jews on
and
Passover.
corn and
Which essentially is a fence around the Torah. That's what it is. It's a fence around the Torah.
Because there's nothing, it's not
chametz.
it's not chametz.
It's clearly not
And
chametz.
the Sephardic eat it. They eat rice. They eat corn. They.
Correct, but that is
Yeah.
different than this because was something that is more recent.
Yeah.
So that's its own discussion, Kitniyot.
Okay.
But it's interesting that these were the three things Pirkei Avot said before we're beginning this process. Make sure you don't jump to hasty decisions. Make sure you have a very wide group of people through whom you debate with before we come up with the halacha. And just because you know today people will observe it, make sure you create a proper safety fence that will ensure that this stays in place for thousands of years. There were questions here. Yes.
The men of the Great Assembly, was that the Sanhedrin?
Yes. Anything else? Okay. Like the Great Court.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, the great
The 70 and all that.
So that's the intro. The first main teaching now is from Shimon the Righteous, and he was at the end of the era of the Great Assembly. Please read it, Pam. This is a famous one. Let's learn it more in depth.
Shimon the Righteous was among the last surviving members of the Great Assembly. He would say the world stands on three things: Torah, the service of God, and deeds of kindness.
All right, so Torah, Avodah, Gmilut, Chasadim. Think of a world on a tripod. That's what it is.
Yeah.
The world is on a tripod, and something with three, I think even, right, scientifically, isn't three strong? Like, something about something with three is stronger than even a table with four. There's a reason why tripods and whatnot have three. And to keep the world, we assume the world just exists. And Shimon HaTzadik says the world is here for a reason. The world is here for a reason. We have to make sure we don't take the world for granted. Like there's a world, of course there's a world. No, there's a world because we're living a certain way. And he writes there's three legs to the way we live our lives. And in other places it discusses a right, left, and center. There is working on yourself character improvement, and prayer, by the way, is in the same category as that, because prayer is supposed to be a time of introspection. So that is the avodah, working with oneself. Then there is working to make the world a better place in the mitzvot and the tzedakah and the kindness we do in the world. That's a second one. And you could say, that's enough. What's wrong with that? Now, then there's the center one. What's the center one? Study of Torah. So right is the impact we have on the world. Left is our own avodah. When you say, hey, before I repair the world, let me fix myself. Let me work on my own relationship with God. My faith, my humility, my character refinement, that's avodah. And then we say, in order to properly define both of those, we need a manual, and that's Torah. In order to have the inspiration necessary to stay focused, we need sets of time for Torah, and that's the middle one. Yeah.
Just a translation thing, because this is the tenets of Beth Meyer, but it translates instead of service of God, it translates it in the website as prayer. In other words, is that different meaning, or is it just a different translation?
The word in Hebrew is avodah. Avodah means
Work.
In biblical times, the avodah was the offerings.
Right.
And today, it's related primarily to prayer. But let me ask a question. Why would prayer be? Avodah means work. Why is prayer called work? If anything, repairing the world should be work.
It's very hard to pray.
Exactly. What actually takes, out of those three, which one really is, I can only speak personally. To have an interesting Torah discussion, that's stimulating, that's easy. I mean, it should be. To do mitzvot, you feel good about yourself, the impact you have on the world. Prayer can feel like you're talking to yourself. It can feel non-meaningful.
But every day the same.
It can be the same. I mean, prayer happens to be the hardest, because to pray properly takes the most inner work. So the reason why they call it prayer is because avodah is primarily connected to prayer today, but it is wider than just that. It means general character refinement. Now, as far as synagogue goes, especially if it's going to be the motto of the synagogue, it makes sense. Prayer, Torah study, acts of kindness.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Could it also be that if you pray personally, you feel you're being selfish, and that you have to get over that feeling also to not feel selfish?
Meaning you need all three. And I think that's a good point. I like the example of the tripod. Each one of us, I would think, have one area that comes easier for us and one area that comes harder for us. So we certainly should go with our strengths. There's no mitzvah to spend all your time working on your weaknesses. You should go with your strengths. If you're a guy that does action, mitzvot come to you, that's what you get excited about, go for that. However, if we only focus on that leg that is easy to us, we're missing out. We're going to be limping. Our tripod is going to be slightly deficient in one area. And therefore, so you're right, if someone only prayed the whole day and said, I'm just working on myself and the heck with the rest of the world, something is lacking. But if someone says, I'm just doing mitzvot the whole day and I'm not going to work on my own character, something is lacking. If someone says, I'm going to do a lot of prayer and I'm going to be fixing the world, but I don't have time for any Torah study, something is lacking. And that's why it says these three.
But I think your average person also thinks that prayer is when you need something and you ask for it. So prayer is not really that at all. I mean, it is part of that is it, but then it's the whole praising God and the whole thanking God for all the things, and then asking for what you need.
Correct.
So it's not just people say prayer. I don't think people.
Prayer is like praying for something. It's not just that.
It's not just that.
Connection.
Yeah.
The word in Hebrew means connection, a time where my soul and God become one. So it's a very powerful one that we often say these words, Torah, Avodah, Gemilut, Chasadim. I think it's good to think about the tripod, to think about which one in our life needs the most work. And for me, I think it's Avodah. That prayer, making prayer meaningful, I know, at least personally for me, would be that. All right. Yes, then.
Rabbi, I've read a lot of articles lately in the newspaper by, like Rabbi Gelman, and to sort of broaden this a little bit, it's the Torah teaches morals and ethics and common decency, and we all have our own formulation through our background and whatever of what's common and what's decent. And one day I asked you, I was troubled by some of the things that are going on in the world today, and I'm not going to specifically mention anything, it's too controversial. But there are a lot of things that are totally against the Torah. And you mentioned to me that if there's a difference in tolerating something and promoting something. How when you feel so strongly against some of the moral decay is this put today by so many different scholars, rabbis, whatever. And how do you really deal with that if the Torah says one thing and things seem like the world's totally upside down in other ways?
Right. It's a very good question.
The Torah,
if you believe it's your manual, then I like thinking what is ultimately going to have the biggest impact. Because I often feel that if something's important to you, like speaking to people one-on-one about it, like sometimes when
I understand the kosher situation, that's just what it is, but
The what situation?
Kosher.
The kosher situation, which you should eat, which you should not eat, but I just expanded a lot farther than that one little specific thing, which is not a little specific thing to a lot of people. It's very important.
How do you differentiate between being tolerant of others while at the same time trying to bring the world to a more Torah place? To bring the world to a more Torah place. I think that especially today, people respond most to love and tolerance. Meaning, it used to be the hard preaching is what made the biggest difference to people. I think today it's through love. I think that's the way you open yourself. Someone is open to you only when there first is that connection.
Well, you got a lot of Christian fundamentalist ministers that get up there and fire and damnation. But I'm not sure that's really the best way to go.
And I think, I think love, yeah.
Well, you touched on something.
He's saying, Dennis made it very good, but we're always struggling between, on one hand, tolerance and acceptance for everyone. In terms of, I respect everyone. I may not agree with the decisions they make in their life, but we're supposed to be a mensch and loving. Ahavat Yisrael, loving towards everyone, and believing that it's not by forcing my beliefs and imposing my beliefs that I affect, but at the same time, we can't condone things that we don't agree to be right, and we should be.
You don't have to participate.
Right, and it's a hard balance, he's saying, sometimes between the two. Yes?
I heard a rabbi say years ago when he disagreed with something, and toleration is fine, but you get to the point where you say, I got to say something. And he would say, let me preface this with the idea that I say it with great love and respect for you. And then he would say it.
I love you, but...
Yeah.
I think...
That's fine too, but if you really don't have any love or respect for what people are doing, it's hard to say that.
Well, you do have
Just
love
to
if
say
you
it.
take the energy of yourself to say it.
Yeah.
That is expressing your love.
I believe that the only way you can really, you first have to have a connection with someone, and then afterwards you can talk about changing them. I think that when you're just preaching without that connection first, they first have to see, like with a child, do they see that I really care and I'm a loving person? And if that's in place, then afterwards it's easier to talk about this or do that. And then also speaking with tremendous humility. I think one of the things that people don't like is when the one preaching acts as if they're all perfect and they're all, everyone has the humility is very, very important.
But I thought you were talking about a more public.
So it could be either way you want to.
Either way.
Either way. Okay.
But are people really influenced by op-eds and speeches and, a lot of the things, making statements, people love making statements today, or protesting or marching or all. I don't know if that's the way to influence.
Well, I object. Sorry, go ahead.
It depends on the
value of silence and that. I mean, do you think that sometimes And again, to me, that is a real struggle when you see what is absolutely wrong. Should you speak out? Or
Well, the
just
Torah says you
remain
can't sit by
silent?
idly if someone's life is in danger. There are
But
clearly times
what
that
if it's
you
not
have to.
necessarily life is in danger? Just a
But,
political.
and I also, again, when I know that in Chabad, if anything is political, we'll stay away from it. That's just what we do because we, yeah, and it would get in the way of a larger message that we're trying to do, but it's something I struggle with. It's not easy. And then I want to go back inside. No, it was a very good point. Yeah.
I saw a good example of this. A Chabad rabbi that we know was at Auschwitz on Yom HaShoah, and he saw a group of Jehovah's Witnesses trying to, with all
Over there at Auschwitz.
At Auschwitz on Yom HaShoah.
That's a chutzpah.
So he walked over to them.
So what were they doing
had
there?
to hear what
Missionizing.
They're missionizing. That's what they do.
Right.
And he walked over and he said, "I say this with the utmost respect and love for you. This is Yom HaShoah. This is Auschwitz. To target Jewish people for conversion here on this day is not very respectful. And I say this with all the love and respect in the world. Would you please not do this today in this place?" And when I heard this, it reminded me of my grandfather seeing one of his grandchildren on the way to shul. He saw one of his grandchildren in the street playing ball.
This is it.
And when he saw his grandson, he said afterwards, I saw a boy in the street playing baseball on Shabbos. Looked like it was my Moshe, but it couldn't be my Moshe. He never played baseball on Shabbos.
Well, because the love there was there. Anyway, it's a broader, all right, let's go to number 3 now, the third teaching here. Here goes. Please.
Antigonus of Soko
Yeah.
received the tradition from
Shimon the righteous. So he received the tradition from the previous generation, right? Shimon the righteous was the last of the great assembly, and then Antigonus got it from Shimon the tzaddik. Okay.
He would say, "Do not be as slaves who serve their master for the sake of reward. Rather be as slaves who serve their master not for the sake of reward. And the fear of heaven should be upon you."
Important idea. In Judaism, it's about serving God. It is not about what's in it for us. He says it's not about, in other faiths, they put so much of the emphasis on the afterlife, what I'm going to get, he's saying in Yiddishkeit, it shouldn't be about what's in it for you. Now, he had 2 students who misunderstood what he meant. You ever hear this, Marty?
No.
And they were under the impression that what he meant is, there is nothing in it for you. There is no reward. There is no afterlife. There is no ultimate justice. That's not what he said. He said that should not be your kavanah. That should not be your intent. When you're doing good in the world, it's not stopping and saying, how am I going to gain from it? What's God going to do for me? That's what he said. He never said that there is no, but those 2 students started an entire sect as a result of this, where they dismissed a lot of their rabbinic teachings and a lot of other things, because what's the point if there's nothing in it for us? So I would say a good metaphor would be a marriage, a relationship. If it's about tit for tat, it never works. And we know on the most subtle level, often we'll do things and at least deep down it's like, well, I'm hoping to get this, or I'm expecting to give that. It's very hard sometimes just to give. Not even want, you give and then you give the kvetch, right? Oh, at least you know how hard this was for me? We all love that. At least I should, And just to give and not want is very, very hard. And he says that's the ultimate relationship. Now, if God forbid one never got, God forbid being an abusive relationship, if there was only giving and never receiving, that's hard to maintain that always. Of course there has to be what's in it for you. And of course we believe ultimately that mitzvot bring us brachot in our life. But it's not that I'm doing this right now, but God, I'm waiting right now. No, where's the results? That's not. So it's a careful balance between a belief that doing mitzvah does bring brachot in our life, but not looking out for that, watching out for that, waiting for that, or making your mitzvah dependent upon that. And that's what he's teaching over here. Any questions? And I think it has many other applications. I don't like when it goes to the other extreme, though, of there's nothing. That's interesting. Why didn't he? Any other comments on this third Mishnah, this third teaching? Okay.
What was the group the sect that they formed? And what
By Susim and actually Tzedukim as well. Tzedukim, they dismissed, Tzedukim and Bisus. The Tzedukim were a group that was very prominent towards the end of the Second Temple. They dismissed a lot of the rabbinic laws. They wanted to have a Judaism that was a lot lighter and easier.
Yeah, like nowadays.
So that's what they did, but one of it had to do with just there's not in it for us. It came from that theological place. So it's interesting how they could have gotten it so wrong.
Really, I mean, just
ask your teacher. Ask your teacher. I don't know. Okay.
Or just a normal life.
Next, number 4.
Yossi, the son of...
Oh, we're running out of time here. Okay. Just do it quickly.
Yossi, the son of Yosur the Saraida, Yossi, the son of Yochanan of Jerusalem, received the tradition from them. Yossi, the son of Yosur of Saraida, would say, "Let your home be a meeting place for the wise. Dust yourself in the soil of their feet and drink thirstily of their words."
So he's encouraging that Torah shouldn't be just something that we go to, but it should be in our house. Many times people want, like, my house is my little, that's neutral, but then I go elsewhere to bring Judaism. And he's saying, no, make a new study session in your home. And he's saying something else as well. When it comes to righteous people often, one of the ways you actually learn the most is not by going to lessons, it's actually by seeing them interact in regular life. The more you can hang around holy and righteous people, even in casual settings, the more you will be able to learn. So he's encouraging people to, hang out, invite, do that. And the next one starts off saying your home, the same thing. I'll just do the first line of the next one. Your home should be wide open. Let the poor be members of your household. I just want to stop there for a moment. Same thing there. It's often that someone wants to do tzedakah, but not in my house. No. I'll give the person money, but like my home is like my little sanctuary. Certain people I don't want to invite into my home. That's not who we have in our home. And he's saying, no, have the tzedakah in your home itself. I know that the next part we would have to go to. I stopped at a communion place.
Yeah.
We'll have to do the next one. We can stay afterwards, whoever wants to do that. I didn't skip anything in here. This is the entire chapter the way it is. But I think that is a nice idea. How often do we give tzedakah, but let's say to someone on the street or something from a distance? There was a beautiful viral video that someone made. It was a chassid, so it made a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. They basically, the Super Bowl Sunday, they went around to a few homeless people in New York City and said, hey, what are your plans for the Super Bowl? Okay. And these are homeless. Like, I don't know. It's like, oh, come to my place. We'll have a party. And he actually invited them into the Super Bowl party, and he filmed the whole thing. And look, I can't say he's a filmmaker. I can't say that there was no personal benefit because this thing went viral, so much so that the Patriots picked it up. And I'm sure it was very good for business, let's just say. But in any event, it was an amazing story where he actually took homeless people and made them feel really, really good and gave them 5-star treatment for a Super Bowl party, inviting them in. And that's what came to mind. You can look it up on YouTube. That's what came to mind. There's something beautiful about getting down and dirty with tzedakah, not just doing it from a distance, and that's what he's saying. And the same thing with Judaism and Torah, bringing it into our home and looking at our home not just as my little private sanctuary.
I was looking at it a little differently and saying that people sometimes treat their family not as well as they treat people on the outside, so they should in their home be charitable also to their spouse and to their children.
Interesting.
Oh, look at this one. Yeah.
Which one?
Number
5?
7. It's hard to go.
All right, so we'll have to continue. If anyone, I mean, it's 12:30. If anyone has to go, I do want to say that number 5 is something that we, again, is a very, very hard one.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Excessive, meaningless chatter. In other words, flirting. That's essentially what he is saying. He's saying, you know, I think of it. It was in the news recently. An interesting thing, and there was, because it's political, everyone jumped out about it, but the vice president made a statement that everyone jumped on. And I'm wondering how much of that is because it was the vice president, which is already all political. But he basically says, I don't dine out with any other women unless my wife is present. Was that something like that?
Yeah,
And he was under, what?
I admire him for that.
I know. But he was under so much criticism for it,
By the feminists.
for saying that, oh, all I am is, you know, because people interpret that as, and again, it's all politicized, as all I am is an object.
Right.
You can't relate to me any other way other than an object, and but maybe he's just saying that's the boundaries that I have. You know, I because it's political, I'm sure there are people in the room with different opinions over here.
Right.
But I'm
thinking that he could, it was more than that. It was that men would have an advantage over women in terms of meeting with him because they could meet with him privately where women can't. Then he shouldn't say, I won't have dinner with anyone, rather than I just have one with a woman. So he was treating women differently. And yeah, there was a reason with modesty and everything, but from a way of someone who works for him, someone who's a woman would be unfairly disadvantaged by not having that ability for the one-to-one.
That's
so that
true.
was
They
more the
couldn't go to
comment.
lunch together
So
because he could take a man to lunch, he can't
That's
take
right.
So
that
there
was
could
the
have
thing,
been a
right.
way to word it in a way.
Well,
but
they say I won't go with anyone. You know.
No, and that gets to be his role as a civil servant can be inconsistent with his
duties.
his modest ideas.
Correct.
Right. Is construed.
Right. Oh, and that, by the way, that is another interesting teaching over there. Look at number 11. He tells the sages, be careful with your words. You might be exiled to a place by evil elements, meaning whatever you say can be held against you. And that was true even back then. How much more so? So it could be, so he said you have to be careful. That was before there was YouTube, you know, someone videoed you or audio. But so number 5 means means you have to be on guard, and there are laws in Judaism about
not
this.
talking.
Excessive, meaningless chatter, flirting.
That's flirting, not talking.
It doesn't say not talking. It says
Chatter
tarbeh sicha means meaningless, just frivolity, kind of laughing around.
Which is different than business.
But not even with your wife?
Oh, so let me explain that next thing.
Even with your own
But
wife,
in New Jersey,
that's
the
not.
reason we're having trouble with this
Yes.
is, at least here in America, is we're trying really hard to not have distinct permitted roles of the genders. Whereas
So-
at this time, that was different.
Correct.
No,
But
it's
what's
not just
interesting
at the time.
about this law is that it actually works both ways as well. This is not like men leading the services, not women. The laws of the separation work both ways the same. So it would be the same with a woman and a man versus a man and a woman. It's not one way, not the other. It's the same both ways.
Wait, come back to
How-
the wife. I want to know about the wife. Why is
However,
why about
today's
the wife?
times,
That's
it's
like-
hard for people to understand this. I'll go back to the wife. You want to hear this warm in
You're
here?
the wife of another.
No.
It says, no, but
You're
then
right.
it continues.
Even with your own wife.
One
Then
is
it-
wife.
So what is the meaning of that?
Yeah, that's not nice.
It's a tough one.
Who wants to be married to Yosef and Yoch?
Not-
The meaning the commentators say is that the essence of the marriage, more time, the majority of the conversations should be quality, substantial. Once one is always a lot of sicha sicha means excessive, meaningless chatter, it is just not a healthy way to do it. It's a tough line to understand. That is what he writes there. It should be more substantial. It should be based on more quality conversation. Too much sicha, too much excessive, meaningless chatter.
I guess because your relationship with your wife can stay superficial if you do that.
Correct. And when you do that, then guess what?
And
that will be also challenging than when you go outside.
Yeah.
When your relationship with one's own spouse stays on a more artificial, superficial, external level,
right,
then you don't have as deep a connection. That makes it more challenging when you venture outdoors as well. That would be
when you have problems, or when you have difficulties in your life, because you don't have that deeper. Okay.
But I think that's why I just, when Penn said that and everyone jumped on it, there was no admiration. Why can't there be some admiration? You might say there's admiration, but at the same time, I still recognize the problems it can have. Why can't there be both? But it was immediately jumped on as and
why couldn't it just be respect for his own wife?
Correct. In any event, I don't want to turn this political, but this is something that we are, thank God, very sensitive in not having gender roles, and we're very sensitive of equality, which are all good. But we shouldn't be so sensitive that if someone says that we don't see the advantages and the beauty in something like this. There's still something very beautiful about setting a fence for yourself, as we said earlier, and putting yourself in healthy situations.
So eventually, what did he say again? That he doesn't eat out with a woman
alone without his wife.
Without his wife.
Or is it without a wife or without someone else present? I thought.
Well, that's the alone part.
He likes to.
That's the what?
Well, I guess.
Well, I thought it was without someone else present.
Well, the statement is a little inconsistent in that regard, because he did say alone without his wife, but you have a third person, you're not alone, even if the third person is not your wife. So that person alone.
I don't want right.
Okay.
But I think it really comes down to, I think the reason some people, of course, got upset because of the objectification of a woman, whereas here he's putting a fence around him. But the reason I get a little more upset is
his role.
His role as a high-level public servant doesn't give him the privilege to cordon off who he can talk to and who he cannot.
But wait a minute.
If he has a staff member who happens to be female, and he won't go have lunch with her because of this, but he has a staff member who is male and he will have lunch with that person, that's problematic.
But I understand that. But I mean, he should have lunch with a female staffer, but not be alone with her. Have either another female or another male. Why? Not even because of any of this stuff, but just plain simple sexual harassment lawsuits.
Right. I think
stuff that people are like flying all over the place.
Wait.
I mean, come on.
Then you're saying a woman in business could never have a private meeting with her boss. Never ever.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that. Saying, you're basically saying that.
So like by the way, even in halacha, I want to point out that this is an issue in halacha as well, not just the president. And there are rules about that, about someone being able to walk in at any time and the door being unlocked. And there's certain guidelines in Jewish law about how to be able to have proper discussions, but at the same time maintain certain boundaries.
Maybe keep the door open and you still have a private meeting. But there's ways of doing it. But
you guys,
we're over our time.
You guys don't know it. Maybe
has some words to say.
We're still recording. This is gonna be on the internet.
we just said, be careful with what you say because people can distort your words. That is
total respect for our vice president.
Exactly. But that is one of the interesting things about ethics of our fathers, that it is not black and white. These things are not black and white. That's why it's in ethics of our fathers. It's not in the Torah. Thank you for all those who listened on our online. God willing, we'll have other weeks of Pirkei Avot in the coming weeks. Have a wonderful week.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.